the COVID experience as sort of bringing out those contradictions. And for me, like it shows how like the right sort of won the COVID conversation as we head into like RFK today, talking about like trying to discontinue the polio vaccine and all that sort of stuff. Like the right won that conversation. You're sort of like how, and this book partly explains how. It's weird how, and I have to interrogate myself too because I was heavy into like I don't know, being a COVID cop a little bit, and now I'm looking back, especially reading this book, and I was cringing at myself, and I'm sort of thinking about my own double as like the COVID cop because I was a warrior online with the people that were like anti-vax or the people that were questioning masks or questioning lockdowns. I sort of came and she talks about how did the left become the cops? How did they become the sort of face of authoritarian COVID policies? And that part of it with like the left and liberals sort of doubling down on all of that stuff and not really being open to any kind of like questioning of what's really going on here and just saying the answer is lockdowns, the answer is masks. We all know. But as much as we know people who went down the conspiracy rabbit hole of like anti-vax, right-wing MAGA shit, we also know people who went down the like COVID rabbit hole of like spraying their vegetables, washing their groceries. I mean, I know people who are like still masking alone inside their cars and being incredibly self-righteous about it. And that part of it is like is part of understanding, I think, how we got scrambled up and our ideas got scrambled up. I'll give you an example. You know that I work for a prominent lawyer in town here. He's sort of like on the anti-vax, anti-COVID lockdown side, but he comes at it from a very sort of like libertarian point of view. And, as an example, at one point, they put yellow like crime scene tape over all the playgrounds and parks in our town, and like they said, no playing outside. No one was allowed outside. And he decided like I'm going to do a little civil disobedience. This is at the height of COVID in like late 2020, and he took like a bunch of kids out to play baseball on the weekend, and people called the cops on him. And he was like, he's a very combative attorney, so he was like, "Call the cops on me. Let's go to court. I'd love to battle this out in court." But I was on the side of like, what are you doing, man? Like, we got to be locked down. These kids are in danger. Like I just kind of had the idea that like I was on the side of the cops, in other words. And I think I've kind of flipped. I think I'm on the other side, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I do see like how ridiculous we all became, and sort of like, yeah, the kids can play baseball outside. It's probably actually good for them. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like we went a little crazy, and like I have to interrogate like what was the double inside me that became so like pro government sort of authority in like really wanting like anti-vaxxers and anti-lockdown people to be punished because I wanted them to be punished. I mean, it was a viral moment in more ways than one, and I have to sort of think about how the right capitalized on all of that in like really broad ways. And that's the other thing I want to add before I throw it back to you is that what Bannon did carefully was sort of read those points of anger and sort of push them out in a general way rather than being like she talked about how he didn't specifically hit things like abortion and guns, things that he knew were divisive. Instead, they used a kind of language that allowed people to like sort of express their anger and revulsion at the government. And we had that recall of Gavin Newsom here after he went to uh, the picture of him at the French Laundry, like this really bougie restaurant, while everyone else was not allowed to go out at all, including like people who weren't allowed to worship or mourn their dead loved ones at funerals. They weren't allowed to do that indoors. To see like a guy just like at a restaurant, like having lobster at the guy that did that, Bannon capitalized on all of that anger. And to me now, I see how it all worked, and I'm kind of like I don't know, thinking hard about why I went down that route because I guess a lot of us did.